Hαίrete, friends. Welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Mar Graves, and today we are discussing the wild Maenads of ancient Greece. If you enjoy this video and you want to learn more about the Maenads afterwards, I would recommend that you check out a book entitled The Greeks and the Irrational by E.E. Dodds. It's an amazing book that covers all kinds of great topics in the ancient world, including this one. Maenads are also sometimes called Backhands or Theades, and they are worshippers of Dionysus. And you can see that in the names. For example, the Backhands comes from Bacchus, which is another name for Dionysus. Now, these are not full-time designated priestess types usually. Usually these are regular women from villages, cities, farms who have their own jobs and lives and families, but they take a break from regular life to celebrate and worship Dionysus. Dionysus, among many other things, is a god of wine, so it's not entirely unreasonable that women would want to get off by themselves, have a girls' night, and let loose a little bit, but this is not as benign as that. The Bacchanals definitely have a frightening side to them, and to get an idea of that, we're going to take a look at a quote from a play that is called The Backhands. This is an ancient play that really explores the terrifying aspects of these ladies and their god. There they, the Bacchanals, turned everything upside down. They snatched children from houses, and all those they put upon their shoulders, though not held in place by any fastening. Upon the hair of their heads they carried fire, and it did not burn them. So you can tell this is not just a few tipsy ladies who are urinating in public, right? They are destroying other people's property. They are stealing not only property, but human children. We are several steps beyond the Girls Gone Wild. And if you have read the larger play that this quote comes from, you know that they get into sort of a bloodlust or a blood frenzy, and they start hunting down animals and tearing them alive into pieces, right? They all just grab onto different limbs and they all pull and the animal comes apart. Very gruesome and gory and horrible. And the sort of climax of the play is when they mistake a human for an animal and they then tear that human to pieces while that human is alive. It's horrible, especially because the human that they choose, that they murder, is related to many of them. So you can imagine when they finally come to and snap out of it, it's a very traumatic, tragic, horrific moment. So hopefully you are beginning to develop a healthy fear of these Maenads. So that passage we just read is from a play, which is meant to be mythical and maybe not taken completely literally. But Maenads were a real thing in the real world of ancient Greece. Women did engage in some strange behaviors occasionally to worship Dionysus, and they would drink and dance and have a good time. They would really party, but then they would engage in other behaviors that are more strange and would seem pretty supernatural if you're watching them. So for instance, they would seem to have an immunity to extreme temperatures. So they might play with fire or dance on coals, that kind of thing, and not seem to be hurt by it. Some Maenads would hike Mount Parnassus, which is 8,000 feet tall. They would do it in the middle of winter, so absolutely freezing, and they would come down the mountain seemingly fine, again, not damaged by that extreme temperature. They allegedly would play with snakes and not be hurt. And they would tear plants and raw meat and consume them. And this was probably a sort of symbolic way of consuming Dionysus and taking his power into them symbolically, right? And people both in the ancient world and now suspect that this particular practice of tearing meat and eating it originally was cannibalistic, like in the play. So they would tear apart and eat a real live human. There is no way to confirm that, but that is a wild story if true. So if you go look at that book I recommended by Dodds, you'll see that after he describes all these crazy things that the Maenads did, he then gets into his thoughts and theories about what was going on in their heads psychologically. What was the deal here? And again, I can't confirm or prove any of this, but it is definitely thought-provoking and interesting. So he says, first off, that if you look at art depictions of Maenads in the ancient world, they're almost always shown with their head thrown back. And if you look at a lot of tribes that are found in the modern world and you look at their dancing style, many of them will have this as well, where they throw their heads back. And it seems like this sort of dancing style can help induce a hysterical state, which is interesting because hysterical patients tend to be analgesic, which means that they don't feel pain in the same way you normally do. When you're in this sort of altered state of consciousness, you could potentially tolerate fire or a crazy cold mountaintop and not feel pain or not react to it in the same way. So that is a potentially interesting explanation. And if they are in this weird hysterical state, then that would also explain why they're able to do things like eat raw meat and not be bugged by it at all. They're just in this other place where that is okay and they're fine with that. Next, he brings up the question, why were so many women in the ancient world almost regularly getting themselves into these hysterical states? And I may be wrong, but I don't think he ever brings up the fact that humans are just very curious about altered states of consciousness, and we like experimenting with them just for the heck of it sometimes. But what he proposes is that women were intentionally getting themselves hysterical to sort of inoculate themselves against hysterics. So he brings up the fact that in the Middle Ages in Europe, sometimes a whole town would just kind of go hysterical. They would lose it and they would dance and go crazy and sometimes die of dancing, which seems like really strange behavior. And he proposes that maybe that was a problem that the ancient Greeks had, that they would just sort of get caught up in these plagues of hysterics, and to sort of inoculate themselves against those plagues, they would purposefully induce a little bit of hysteria every couple of years or so. And so that is his theory. That is definitely interesting, but once again, cannot 100% confirm or prove. So, how many of those stories about Maenads do you think are true? What do you think was the deal? What was their mindset? And have you heard other theories that I didn't mention? Let me know. I'm interested to read those comments. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Special thank you as always to subscribers and to Patreon members, and I hope to see all of you again next week. Χαίρετε.